It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Alrighty, welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted weekly from a kitchen bench in Kingsland, Auckland, New Zealand. My name's Lewis and I'm the host of the show. He is kind and gentle teacher. He is kind and gentle teacher. I've been doing some summer work with international students and some of the first appraisals came through today. He is kind and gentle teacher. Maybe that could be a tagline for the podcast. Kind and gentle teachings from my guests, not myself. Some kind and gentle teachings to follow quite shortly from Mr. Tobi Muir. I'll talk a little bit more about him in a second. Everyone these days is, have you watched this? Have you watched that? Have you watched this? Have you watched that? I'll give you this on a USB key. That's on Netflix. You should watch the third series of that. The second series of this wasn't so good. I got about 4 episodes in. I did watch 8 series of that though. Have you seen this documentary? Have you seen Thor at the cinema yet? And so I've got a bit of overwhelmed of late, and I was guilty and in that camp as well. So a combination of busyness and data overload. I hadn't been watching a lot at night or during the days, actually, just for the record. I did binge watch many episodes of Nevermind the Buzzcocks in the middle of the day, quite guiltily while I was doing my masters, but that's another story. But anyway, I haven't been watching much lately, being the last couple of months, but in the last week I've watched two things I thought were quite interesting for quite different reasons, both on Netflix. Like, they need any more promo, Lewis. Anyway, one was about when Jim Carrey went into full immersion method acting for playing Andy Kaufman. He's most famous for being Ludka on Taxi, but more in the canons of comedy and whatever else he was, history, just as a general kind of performance anarchist. I'm trying to think what I call him. So anyway, Carrey channels him to the point for that film, is it Man on the Moon, which came out late 90s from memory. But this is behind the scenes kind of footage of Carrey's journey to play that character. Universal shelved it for years. They thought it was too mad and would reflect badly on both Carrey and the company. An interesting watch. I'm not sure it's a 5-star, most amazing documentary ever, but some of the footage in it of Carrey, channeling Kaufman to the point where family members of Kaufman kind of come in to see him, like the actual Andy Kaufman's been reincarnated, are pretty nuts. And the other thing I watched from Nick Broomfield, who I think did Biggie and Tupac and Kurt and Courtney. He's dropped the ampersand-based documentaries and done a doco on Whitney Houston, and I really enjoyed it, found it really interesting, and I found her story quite analogous to Michael Jackson's in a lot of ways, with kind of family nuttery and little bit of sprinkling of religious nuttery, but also stuff around sexuality and so on. I won't give away too much. It's quite an easy watch. Check that out. Anyway, Tobi. Hi, Tobi. Tobi came on, and I met Tobi. I came back to New Zealand in 2007, and I was doing a job, as in, for those familiar with the Chris Rock bit, the difference between a job and a career is very much definitely doing a job. I'm spurting out lattes for the well-heeled of Herne Bay. Somehow Tobi turned up in that suburb one day, and just happened at the time as well I was doing the reggae show on a short-lived but quite amazing little media thing in Auckland called Alt TV, where someone managed to get a full-power TV frequency and put on people kind of in a manner analogous to somewhere between kind of New York public access TV and student radio. So anyway, did I say I was doing the reggae show? I said at the time, I'm not sure I'm the man for the reggae show. I like my reggae. I own a lot of reggae records and so on, backbone of a lot of the music I play, but I'm not sure I'm the host. Anyway, it's Tobi. I hadn't met him, didn't know him from Tobi, and he came into Herne Bay Cafe one day and said, "Oi, you're that geezer on the telly." He didn't say that. He must have said something nice about it, though, because I have good memories of that day, Toby. And then we've just bumped into each other over the years since, and always a good yarn, and I feel like a kindred spirit, one of those sort of those friends who are, aren't hang out all the time friends, but good value when you see them. So Toby ended up in London for his teens and 20s and got quite immersed in being a Londoner, being a very regular working DJ, getting the hell out of Dodge, as it were, coming back to New Zealand because he grew up here as a kid. I was going to make these intros short. Anyway, have a listen. If the first part you kind of go, well, who's this Nicky Black Market that they're talking about, and why is he saying DJ Hype's a Muppet and so on, and these names and so on aren't familiar to you? I hope it's an interesting story nonetheless of London, more broadly speaking, their music throughout that period, the 80s and the 90s. But later on we do get a bit more general for those of you not immersed in the styles of music we talk about. We end up talking about politics, environment, community. We moot the idea of a unifying festival in Auckland, and it's just a nice chat. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, which was lovely too, and there were dogs here. There was a dog here. There was two dogs here. There was a sausage dog and another kind of dog, and they were nice dogs. You could tell Tobi's a good dog dad. Dog dad. It was Dog Dad Afternoon. Dog Dad Afternoon on the podcast. Like the show, the Verbal Highs on Twitter, Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook, iTunes. You can subscribe and write something nice. God, I was going to make that brief. Sorry, it's been nearly 7 minutes. Bloody hell! Hope you even make it to Tobi.
Verbal high straight down from up above.
What are you twirling that for?
Oh shit! Sorry.
That's
Not used to them. I'm treating it like an SM58.
It's just like surely the ones at base are like talking to the front.
Yeah, they probably are. Yeah.
There's some water there.
Thank you.
Dogs are kitted out.
Dogs are happy.
Tobi's kitted out. You're right on that seat.
I'm all good. Yeah, that's actually ideal. Oh. Yeah. Happy Sunday.
So last night was a bit treacherous.
Treacherous. Yes. Or in terms of what?
Oh, you just said it turned into a big night.
It turned into a big night. Yeah, had a great night with the boys, drinking Fijian rum, Bounty rum, Mutiny of the Bounty. Apparently, that was the thing.
No carver.
No. We introduced them to a few local Bethel Valley specialities which grow in our hills, which were well received by the Fijian lad.
And so then the show today, and then I suppose I should say who you are.
Yeah, hi.
My guest today is originally from London, where he cut his teeth in the early jungle scene. He's the outspoken man behind Auckland's undisputed sound clash champions of Australasia, Jafa Mafia Sound System. And I quote, Jafa running 13k watts of 4-way valve preamp goodness. The nicest sound you've heard down here. It's Mr. Tobi. Yeah. Or Tobi Jafa.
Tobi Jafa, yeah, g'day.
Would you say you're an activist as well?
I'm in that border between slactive and active.
Yeah.
You know, I'm people who know me know I'm fairly vocal about my political views, and I do have associations with certain radical types, all for the good cause. We're on that side of the ledger, the left side of the ledger. You know,
yeah.
We've been active. I take my options. You know, and one of the key issues for us with our sound system, it's available to those causes.
Yeah.
So if there's an issue with migrant workers being exploited or whatever, and there's a thing, or if it's asset sales, if it's Greenpeace's Christmas party, we'll do our bit with our system to support what we believe are the good people fighting the good fights.
And who's us now?
Well, the roving crew. It's cast 1,000 over the years now. Originally, we started with, you would have met old Bolash back in the day.
No, you talked to me about him for that article I wrote about sound systems. Is this the quote, Hungarian plasterer dude? The
Hungarian plasterer dude. I think he's an engineer by trade, Bolash, but he was one of those random wash-ups on a Friday night I think I was playing on BFM back then. I used to do a show called Thunder and Joy, playing a full spectrum dance show. And then this random guy turned up. We started the sound together. He now runs Budapest Hi-Fi in Budapest, which is the premier sound in Budapest, I'd say. Well, that's what he says. And I'm taking his word for it.
Sounds not dissimilar to some of your copy.
Well, never sell yourself short.
Because with the sound system thing, back in the day in New Zealand, and there's been different thoughts and feelings on this, sound system was a tag for a collective of DJs, but around the time you kind of showed on up, it was actually about sound system culture kind of being built, actually physical systems being built. So is that what you and he did? Did you build...
Well, it was always we identified there was this odd thing. There was a lot of people saying we are the so-and-so sound system, but it wasn't. There was actually nobody. Well, there was people, but it was very rare to find people who actually owned and operated sound. So we formed as a DJ team initially, and Bowler just went straight out and bought a couple of Wharfdales and a sub.
Yeah.
Pretty much, not great gear, but we could then raid parties, gate crash things, and we started off pretty much as a guerrilla operation.
Yeah.
I mean, our first gig was in the car park, one of our first rollouts in the car park at Soundsplash in Raglan, because Brian Railway wouldn't book us, and we look, bro, we want to do a sound system thing, a pokey little sound. So we just set up in the car park, which ended up being quite an entertaining exchange, as Brian Railway security tried to turf us from the car park, but the Black Power guys camped next to us from Hamilton had other ideas, because they quite liked our tunes. So that was we set our teeth in a certain direction. And,
good. I don't know how to say good, but protective friends to have for the rest of the event.
They were very charming lads. Didn't move much. It was pretty much them guys circling around a bong all fucking afternoon. But they were perfect. There was no one turning our tunes off without their say so. So it was great. And then of course I was always active in doing stages for Splore and other events. And when I came over here, I was a dance DJ. So I was booked as Saturday night main slot on Splore back when Splore was a small thing.
Yeah.
And couldn't afford bigger artists than me.
Called Tobi Jafa?
No, well, back then I was just Tobi Muir. I never could settle on some interesting sounding, quirky DJ name. I struggled for years. I was going to be Tobi 1 back in the day, which I thought should have done. But then, of course, when I came here, there was Obi-Wan, and I was like, oh, Jesus, you can't go with that.
It's like when Armand van Helden got really famous, and then suddenly some Armand van Buren guy is I'm like, is that part of that fame related to the fact that it's kind of... are they okay?
Oh, they're just... Sorry, there's a bit of background dog sausage.
No, it's good. It's ambience.
Ambience. Oh, wait, shut up, you two. Oh, wait, they'll be all right.
I think it's going to hotbox in here with everything shut. Are you all right?
No, it's all good. Yeah.
So where were we? You were at Splore.
Yeah, so I did, and so I got involved with that crew because obviously my DJ career started in the fringes of dance music, as we saw, because dance music was a fringe thing. Back in the early 90s, I completely ignored acid house, or largely ignored it. It seemed to happen around me, but we were into hip-hop and reggae and rare groove, and our DJs at house parties back then were Norman J, Trevor Mad Hatter. These, obviously, looking back, we were fairly lucky,
Whereabouts in London are you from, then?
So I'm from North London. Well, I was born in Dunedin, but brought up in North London.
That's a connection to New Zealand.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. See, we were actually, well, funnily enough, and it all ties in, my political activism is probably largely due to the fact that our family was run out of Dunedin in the 70s for their political activism,
Oh, so you actually lived here for a period?
Yeah, I was born here.
But so how old were you when you...
I left, we left when I was 5,
yeah.
But we finally settled in England when I was 10. So
what happened in that 5 years?
Back and forth,
Oh, so you actually have a memory of growing up in New Zealand? I had no idea.
Yeah, hard out. I mean, that's the thing. I'm, like hard out. Wanaka summers. Chasing geckos around and shooting 308 Uncle's 308. Proper Kiwi upbringing. South Island upbringing. So
do you sound Kiwi to your London mates? Because you sound very British to me.
No, I get thoroughly rinsed when I'm over there with my. My slips and my Cockney accent. So
run out of Dunedin because what was it? Was it something your mum was doing? Your dad was doing?
My mum and dad. My dad was involved in setting up the first law centres in New Zealand. Yeah. My mum was involved in abortion rights. This is back when this was very controversial, heavyweight stuff. My mum was also involved in
when the church was still partly running the country.
Yeah, I mean this is a very reactionary, very right wing situation under. Sorry, there's a dog fight in the background. Don't worry about that.
$5 on the little one.
So my mum Penny, she was the bones of the operation in lots of ways. She was the key, holding it all together. My dad was a total wild card. He was an activist lawyer. He was involved in land rights issues. And as I say, he was trying to set up law centres so people without money could have access to legal representation and justice. That eventually led to him getting death threats from the local cops in Dunedin.
Wow.
And it was time to bail. The 70s were fairly raw times, And so we ended up in the 70s and to the early 80s in London, which was a bonus.
So there's no... Right, but there's no media coverage or no history of this, but your family were run out of New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
Based on political and social issues.
Yeah, there was a decision to be made. The reality is they probably weren't going to go around murdering white lawyers' kids. But the call was made. We know where your kids ride their bicycles. Decision was made to get the fuck out. And also, it was a combination of elements. But, I am a political refugee.
Yeah.
So to some extent, I can identify with those issues.
But so why, with that sort of heavy situation you described, are you guys still coming back from your 5 to 10? Why are you still coming back?
Well, because it was life transplants are quite difficult. My mum was English, born in England, and brought here. And again, my grandfather was another one of those ones who ran when he thought the time was right. But in the 1950s, he exported my mum to New Zealand because they thought the place was going to get nuked. Everyone was convinced it was the end of days in the 50s. There was potential nuclear war, the Cold War was was a great unknown. So he fled. And he was a psychiatrist and ran Cherry Farm Mental Hospital in Dunedin. Funnily enough, conducted New Zealand's first LSD test, which I think I'd mentioned to you before. But that's my granddad. So you can see there's a kind of a pattern emerging of relatively odd people who cause problems and then leg it.
That might be the quote of the episode. And so they're still around, you folks?
Yeah, my granddad's actually only stopped practicing a few years ago. My mum and dad are still, they're still... My mum's a practicing lawyer in London. Yeah. She's actually a pretty good criminal lawyer. She represents some fairly heavyweight characters and got a good rep. So she's still working. She's 73, I think. Yeah. Jesus, I hope you're not listening, Mum, and I've aged you.
He did say you're good at your job, though, Mrs. Muir.
Oh, yeah. She's a kick-ass lawyer. She believes everything these clients tell her.
Well, I think you have to...
It's an amazing
I think you have to have a remarkably sharp mind to be even a good criminal lawyer, full stop, let alone in your 70s. So,
Yeah, no, well, that's the thing.
I'm starting to forget where I put things even now.
Yeah. Well, that keeps them sharp,
And your old man's still working in...
Oh, no, the old man clapped out many moons back. He was a burnout, really. So, he's done it. He's a wonderful... Sorry, Dad, if you're listening. You won't be. You don't do internet.
I thought you meant you clipped out like it would be impossible for him to listen. So he's still around.
He's still around. Okay. Yeah. No, he's still around. He's one of those characters who keeps on despite all the odds. Yeah. But yeah, no, all my family's there. Basically, there's just me and my wife. We fled London. We thought the time was right.
Yeah.
And pretty much as I call it the geographical cure. When you're DJing, you're 27 years old. You're living in London. You're DJing in all the top spots. Drugs and alcohol are a serious threat to your fucking life.
Yeah.
And I saw myself going down a road. And I traded in basically a career as a fucking DJ in London, which was considerably more lucrative and prestigious than anything I was going to face here. But it wasn't even a question for me. Right. Music's music, And I knew when I came here on my first sortie that I heard such good music here.
Yeah.
Didn't matter to me as long as I could listen to the music and play the music. Didn't matter to me where I was playing it.
So you came back here after many years of just being a Londoner, essentially staying in the UK.
From the age of 10 to 28, I never came back.
And with the perils of the job and hedonism and stuff you talked about, I saw a post from you once before. What if you want to talk about it? But you actually ended up quite deep with the drug thing for a period, didn't you?
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I developed a small heroin habit by the time I left London. Nothing life threatening, but it was. Still
had a pad and wasn't selling friends things and all that sort of stuff.
No, I mean, totally legit holding down a job. I just started to see the people's looking at me like I looked at junkies because it was starting to show. Right. And I knew that there was only one way out because drugs aren't going to go from London. Yeah. So I had to get out of London. So
it's funny, I don't associate smack with that whole period of time and that music scene and all the rest of it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it underpinned it. Like drugs and music, of course, as you'd well know and have probably discussed a few times, have been integrally linked for time immemorial, right? Yeah. And there's phases in which things change and shift. Something comes in and it changes the music, and it can change the scene. And anyone who's worked in one of those places where there's quite an influential scene, like London or whatever, man, you can see it happen. It plays out. Ketamine had a huge impact on London and on the music scene there.
Where are we? Early 90s?
Well, I'd say the mid to late 90s. It started to get a bit fucking crazy. Because
I didn't. Heroin in the 90s, I doth not consider together, but then there might be a New Zealand thing because it had a big thing here in the 80s, 70s and 80s. It was huge here. Mr. Asia, it all dried up. A lot of those junkies started taking like our good old New Zealand homemade version of things, which was home bake. And then, as far as I knew in the 90s, it was a very kind of fringy thing, so it's sort of interesting to hear. And now you've got in the States, to be about politics and activism, you know all about the polite opiate epidemic.
Which is extraordinary.
In the US. It's like heavier than any heroin that was ever a street drug. It's
terrifying.
Yeah.
But that's just, of course, there seems to be a way of a constant struggle between the illegal drug industries, which... I've worked in them. Hey, I'm a nightclub DJ, and I've never been one of these people who's pretended that I deliver the beats for people who are high, who have been sold illegal drugs.
Yeah.
That's been a considerable part of my early career. Yeah. Now, luckily, I'm a reggae DJ, so they're just drunk and stoned. Which, people take their choices, but...
Don't be so dismissive of the healing powers of ecstasy, Toby.
Oh, no, I don't. I think it's a fantastic thing. And that was transformative. I saw what it did to London, It suddenly...
You had hooligans hugging each other in the stands.
Yeah, an extraordinary thing. London was not a particularly welcoming or placid place when you're a young kid from Dunedin getting dumped into a secondary school with 2,000 people, and the first question comes up to you and says, how old are you? And you're like... I don't even know what that fucking means.
You might have seen like two episodes of Grange Hill.
It was really pretty much, So but it was a tough place, and it was confrontational, and it was massive class differences between people and racial divides, which were London was a multicultural city, so it was better than anywhere else in the world, but it was still existed.
Yeah.
People still polarised.
And
ecstasy changed that massively.
And the high school thing, I'm just doing the maths in my head with the dates and times and stuff. You moved to Thatcher's Britain as well, didn't you? So that's hardly like sunshine, lollipops and rainbows. So those people are reflective of what was going on.
Absolutely. Well, actually, my first memory of Thatcher was actually positive, because I didn't drink milk, and she was known as Margaret Thatcher, the milk snatcher. And I was quite alarmed when I went to a British primary school that it actually forced you to drink the milk. You were supposed to drink your bloody milk.
Right.
And I was like, I don't like milk. And then, thankfully, Margaret Thatcher took it away. The only good thing she ever did for me.
So what did you think of that transformation, man? Like, that from that into, like, all the Cool Britannia and all that kind of rhetoric and stuff. It's all political and stuff. And then you've got the drug thing happening as well, which I don't think a lot of people tie into the mainstream history of how the UK and England changed. But did it feel like a change while you were there?
Yeah, massively. It felt like everything was being contested, and I suppose contests always result in some form of change if you don't end up with status quo. But the bleakness that Thatcher spread across the land was fuel for us. There's nothing like being strip searched in the back of a fucking police van when you're 12 years old. There's nothing like being punched in the face.
Have you heard that?
Oh, all of it. London is a hardcore place.
Fucking hell.
If you're a little toe rag and your
mate's
mate's trying to have
white
fun,
boy from New Zealand would get strip searched in 12 in a van.
Hard. This is my black friends got worse. So I always consider myself lucky, despite some of these things which sound pretty bleak.
What would they do that to you for? Just being out on the street?
We were toe rags, man. By the age of 10 or 11, we were just off in the streets. Most kids with single parents who couldn't contain them just went off. We were partying by the age of 13, 14.
Your folks went. You were from.
I just said, my single mum, broke as she qualified for a lawyer when we were in London, and we were all living in a one-bedroom flat, and me and my two brothers. It was proper skint which is fine because I had a robust upbringing in New Zealand where the luxuries of 1970s parky hard young kids in the 70s.
Yeah, you've got this. That's so
wonderful.
That's out of it. You've got this whole. Can't even think of the word. You've got this whole cultural package that all your mates that you're running with in the UK then don't even.
Entirely alien.
Even the beach.
Yeah, entirely alien.
Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know people I've known pretty much all my life who've, they might not have seen a beach till they were 30.
When was the last time you were back, man?
I went back for some family stuff a couple of years ago.
Well, did you bump into some friends who are still there doing it in that pocket of that?
Yeah. No, you kind of bump. I think we were sitting in a pub and there was a guy called Steve Blonde who he ran the first flyer packet company in London, right? Flyer packets became a thing outside. So instead of just one guy handing out a flyer for his event, they would have paid employees who have a bag of really cool flyers from Fabric and everybody, and they hand out these packs, and it's got little pack of lollies in there, and it's the whole thing. And this guy Blonde invented it. He does bookings at Fabric. You kind of go into a pub and he's like, oh yeah, I own this pub now, and I own that pub, and it's like, I was oh shit, I did such a good career moving here. all the bros.
Oh, I see.
In terms of like they're all macking it,
but then still being cool. London's incredible, but still being stuck in that one place all that time. It's quite taxing,
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't trade it in for a minute, but because I was brought up in a country which had beaches and stuff, and I had an expectation of that, there was no way I could live without it. Really, I had to go, but I wanted to be in the bush, and I knew that from a very early age. So London was always a means to an end, I suppose. Looking back on it,
but you knew what being in a bush was like.
Exactly, yeah. And you can't translate that to somebody.
Yeah.
You can't explain it to somebody.
Yeah.
They've got to be put in it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And then you say you're running with like a crew that's like, West Indians and other white kids and stuff. Was that unusual of you? Because I think it's quite a segregated time in England. All were kids not.
No, it was.
So there was a new generation coming through that.
Well, the thing is, the punk generation, and the reggae, the late '70s punk reggae link-ups, and Skins and Ska and all of that had already been well established. My uncle and his generation, my uncle's probably in his mid-50s now, but he's 5 to 10 years older than me. They had already linked up. The kids had stopped. The polarities had changed significantly. So multiculturalism was firmly the case amongst us as friend groups and cultural. I didn't know half the slang had come from Jamaica. I didn't know that scene was a Jamaican word. Just everyone was calling each other bumper class and blood class. So you just don't know. It becomes part of the landscape.
Yeah.
But I think, of course, but class divides massively.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until. I had one black friend, Jesse Hall, whose father, Stuart Hall, a very renowned academic from Britain. He was the only black friend of mine who had a middle class house with middle class expectations. There were huge class issues which still divided, but that sort of started to ease up a bit, I think.
Is it still like that now?
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
I think there's a class exodus from London. You hear about these gentrification riots in Shoreditch. I'm removed from it, but I do.
Did it do you head in when the tower burnt down?
Everything around. I'm still utterly horrified by Grenfell.
Everything around the capitalist greed aspects of that. To me, that's just the worst example of humanity in terms of an unnecessary event. The way I read it.
Yeah. I mean, if you see my Facebook, I've still got the picture of Grenfell as my Facebook profile. I'm deeply affected by that. Not me personally, but I think there's something I don't even think about it, because it means it's quite significant to me that happened to those people. It's I've seen corporate murder, I've seen people killed by the justice system, I've seen people killed in the streets by gangs. These things happen, but that was something utterly horrific about that.
Yeah.
Knowing that area well, always celebrating.
Oh, is it up north? Is it north? Is it?
No, well, it's not in Hill, but that's the thing. One of my oldest friends from London, we used to Latimer Road. He had a flat in Latimer Road. His mum was a single mum living in a council flat there. Grenfell would have been round the corner. I don't remember the block. Lovely, I wouldn't mind one of those cold, refreshing brews. It's just, it hits home, isn't it? Corporate murder.
Well, I'm not from. Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm not from there. Obviously, I've travelled there, but it hit home for me, and just in terms of what I just said, everything coming back to, your spreadsheet, your bottom line. If we don't install that, we don't do that.
Yeah, it's a horror.
But hopefully, that sort of thing. You'd hope there'd be huge change in systems around that now.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much change. I don't think we're in that position anymore. I think there may not be another Grenfell, but there's always other ways to kill people by neglect.
Hey, this is cheery. Should we stop here?
You brought up Grenfell. Now let's talk about Notting Hill Carnival. No,
Yeah,
no.
I'll tell you about Notting Hill Carnival. Speaking of all your scene and Bomberclut and so on, I was here. It was obviously pre-internet. Well, there was internet around, but it wasn't a resource as such. So I had import records. I had the knowledge of friends who'd been overseas. I had, being up at the radio station, blah, 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 blah. I get to London. This is the year 2000. I'd done the Red Bull Academy and so on. And people had said, get to Notting Hill, get to Notting Hill. It was actually Carnival. It was Bank Weekend. I landed the morning of Bank Weekend.
Yeah.
I cried with tears of joy. Honestly, I don't mean cheesy.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done that before. I had sunglasses on.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like, "Ah," but I was like, my God, my eyes I was actually, the point being was all the language and the culture and everything.
Just
I was like,
overwhelming.
holy shit,
Yeah.
I've landed in the middle of everything that's been my music taste the past few years. All the bits of the
brilliant.
culture I've kind of picked up.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
What a...
It's just what's great about it is it's one of the biggest unregulated, people-driven events in Europe. Right, there's massive events. There's the Love Fest in Berlin and whatever. There's many festivals. There's commercial things, but this is entirely a grassroots event. It's London's big street party for Londoners by Londoners.
I thinking with something like Love Parade. I mean, I've not been, but it feels to me like Notting Hill would potentially get a wider sort of range of people, age-wise and race-wise.
Race-wise, musically more diverse. I don't know actually. I can't imagine. But, the great thing about people, Carnival, it's all about reggae. It ain't all about reggae. It's about the Carnival, man.
It's about a whole lot of things.
I always make a beeline for finding some, grime sound system with little youth gangs. And that's usually, I'll spend a good few hours at one of those just because the tunes are off the chart. They literally are off the chart. You don't know what's coming next. And the energy is amazing.
And for people unaware, if you're into what we kind of broadly call bass music now. Carnival often sets the tone for what the big records will be globally from all those different genres, right?
Yeah.
How did you discover it all, man? Did you know your nipples were tweaked by music in New Zealand, or was it in London you started seeing sound system culture? And we're going back to sort of teenage child and stuff now,
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing. I mean, everyone probably can blame a parent for having music fascinations, and I'd say my mum and dad. Me and my older brother had a record player from the age of 5.
Yeah.
And old Motown stuff and Beatles singles. My mum and dad didn't play any of their records, so they just dumped them in our bedroom. So we were playing records from a very early age and buying records from an early age. And because New Zealand's always been this receiver culture in some way, there's an interesting thing because you're the last stop on the line here, right? So everything has to come from quite a way to get here, There's a bit of a cargo cult element, Things,
I don't know what that means.
Well, that idea that there's a plane flies over an island in the Pacific and a bit of the cargo falls out and it lands there and then the tribe finds it and my God, God has given us a gift and a sign, So something out of context can be can do a myriad of different things when you take it to the logical extent, all this far, far, far way away. So, like 70s Dunedin, my old man was listening to Peter Tosh, there's no explanation for why those records were getting to New Zealand, but people were bringing them in. And New Zealand's always been this place which has been hungry for inputs of culture from overseas. And now, of course, we generate our own culture, but it wouldn't have been the case so much in the 70s. Jesus, I don't remember what New Zealand pop tunes in the 70s were. All I heard in the pop 70s charts here were import music.
Yeah.
So it was a great thing.
Well,
we didn't.
I mean, it was a going to the mainstream side of things. It was a blip on commercial radio. I think it was 1% or something.
Yeah,
so
totally.
That's right.
And of course, I had this my crazy uncle Adam. He was a big influence because he was dragged out in New Zealand. My grandfather moved back to England before we did. So my uncle would have been about 12, 13 when he landed. And he was born here too, but he was, again, dumped into the late 70s England and a considerably different thing. And he was running around with a bunch of rude boys, they were into ska and reggae, and I pillaged his record collection.
I'm sure.
It was amazing. Yeah. So I've got to credit him massively for that influence, and I had an auntie who was banging into punk and goth and new wave. So the exposure was family exposure, and I think as a function of us being feet in two camps, being a London-based family based in New Zealand, we had those great links. So
I think I want to come to a family reunion, bro. It sounds like an interesting bunch of people. But when does it turn into...
You kind of want to wear Kevlar to those.
because you go from there, but like to actually start, DJing and so on? Because you ended up places like, I think you played for years at the End, which is not, it's not exactly an easy gig to get. How did you get into the DJ side of things?
Well, that was again through.
It's kind of hard to avoid in London if you're into music, I guess.
Well, it was even then which was pretty early days. I mean, I knew people who'd been DJing for 5 years and they were regarded as old school, because DJing was a relatively new thing.
Yeah.
And we were in obviously the right place in the right time. North London was a hotbed. Because North London's a bit richer than South London. It's got the same kind of ethnic and cultural mixes.
I need a date here for the train spotters when North London was. When's this? Late 80s?
This is be 80s, yeah. So mid 80s to late 80s, and I kind of got my head around music then and partying. But then the launch came in the early 90s. I was DJing, and I was we had pirate stations and we had hardcore music. It was called hardcore back then. It was post acid house, much more influenced by hip hop and everything,
and sound system reggae culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And you started hearing the first inklings of what was going to become jungle, and we were obviously like, well, Jesus, I'm kind of into this hardcore stuff, but you put a reggae bass line in, I'm really into it. So it was a DJ-driven thing as well, people requesting those tunes. But during that period of time, our group of mates was Mates in Brixton, Mates and around, and we had a connection out in East London. An old friend of mine, Phil, was living in Leytonstone in this really weird little sort of isolated council estate surrounded by this wasteland. But one of the neighbours, he was living with a guy called Charles Kosh from Moksha Management. He was manager as a shaman. So those guys were involved. So we had Mr. C, and those guys would come. We'd do little house parties, and those guys were on the same scene. And of course, Mr. C had the money and the investment to build and start the End.
Yeah.
We were a part of a crew of people. So when that actually happened, of course, we were already part of his crew. So we were regarded as good DJs to chuck into the bar. But at that stage, it was like there was a kind of this fusion music. I was listening to mainly and playing pirate stuff, but with my other crew from town, we were into other beats. We were into basically trip-hoppy, proto-trip-hop, early stuff. There was kind of stuff coming out of the west coast of the States. There was stuff coming out from all over the place, early Kroder and Dorfmeister stuff. Tripped-out beats, Chemical Brothers, all of those guys were involved in that.
Wall of Soundy kind of...
Yeah, so we were residents of Wall of Sound.
Yeah.
Our artist was signed to Pussyfoot.
Yeah.
We were involved with Skint Records.
Yeah.
So Norman Cook, all of those people were part of our scene because they're all based around Camden. Jazzy J, I said notes you've got him on the wall here.
Yeah.
He used to come and ponce pints in the pub I worked in. So all those people were our gen, and it was kind of tight. So I got to play at the Heavenly Social in the back room, which is a pretty damn honourable thing to have had an opportunity to do.
Yeah.
Didn't appreciate at the time that these guys would be huge. But
well, I think that's the
they're
thing.
Already
but I think if you do that at the time, it's kind of trite and stuff. I think history often tells these stories. I think you just enjoy what you're doing at the time.
You did. I was a shit gig.
Then you look back and go, fucking hell.
It was a pretty average gig, actually, to be honest.
Yeah. It's like 3 people and one of the Needles was playing up. But what I can tell people now is...
I was there.
Yeah.
But like the end was our home, though, because we were there specifically to do what we wanted.
Yeah.
We weren't booked because they wanted us to play a certain thing. They wanted us to play exactly what we wanted to play.
Who's us?
Me and a guy called Matt Silver and Phil Lewis. We were a crew called the Weird Beats Collective.
Yeah. And so you'd play main... Oh, there was only a main room at the end because there was the bar. There's that sort of bar area to the side.
We were the bar.
On the bar area side.
The bar was our kind of our monthly bar session basically, we just make the most of it. It was an ability. I could play stuff off the Pirates, which wasn't getting played in clubs in London. Like early garage and stuff that just didn't make the transition.
Man, you and I have very similar music taste. All these names.
Well, that was the thing. Yeah. Like I could sort of bring that stuff into the club, and the bar stuff all early garage.
So beginnings of kind of two-step and
well, that was the thing. I just knew what the big tunes were because you just feel a big tune when it drops. I know 20, 30 bars into something whether it's a huge hit. You just do after a period of time once you've done your 10,000 hours, So you just bring in the latest big tune, like the jam that I loved off the garage station. I'd play it in the end, where we might have Skint Records doing their thing. It might be a drum and bass night. We were residents with Full Cycle, with a whole spectrum of those guys. Ronnie Size and all of that, but we could just counterbalance this with anything we wanted, and it was great.
Yeah.
And this is when I learnt the lesson: you don't play to the crowd, and when you're a warm-up DJ, you play to the bar staff and the security.
Yeah,
because
right.
that's when you get asked back. You know,
True.
And
You set their night off right.
Yeah, well, I mean, back then, of course, clubbing tourism wasn't as big as it was now, but it's quite an international audience. So you were kind of under this.
Well, hang on, we're not in the 80s now. The end.
No, we're in the
not
90s.
mid-90s.
So we were residents there from 95 to 98,
Right.
pretty much. And working in and around there, we had there was a band called the Head Drillers, which Phil managed. They were kind of quite similar to a Prodigy type sound.
Yeah.
They were on Wall of Sound, I think they were signed to, or one of those.
Did you?
labels.
What was Lewis about to ask? Did you? God, it's not often I'm stuck for a question. I can't finish that. Did you? Oh, did you? Did you see? I think it was Mr. C moaning about people not listening to his record yesterday on Facebook.
I do see,
and
his
it
posts.
turns into it sort of turned on him because there's all these people
really?
saying, "Look, with respect, I work really hard. Blah 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 blah. I can't check out everything. Maybe your publicity was wrong and blah blah." But because I was sitting looking at it,
Richard's an interesting guy.
I'm looking at it, and it's like, you know, those classic, like, if you're a bit forensic about it, I'm like, it's 12:30 a.m. on Saturday night in London. Is this the best time to round off the PR campaign about your album? But then by the end of it all, and I'd read through, and so many people chimed in. He's obviously, you know, got a lot of followers and stuff. I actually thought, ironically, you know, whether he did that, you know, not in hindsight the best move, it kind of was, because I know about his new album now.
Yeah.
But the rant was about 6 paragraphs long.
Oh my God! Yeah. He's obviously decided to make his own rules up about these things.
I like social media characters, and he is one. You know?
He is.
I mean,
He's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I only sort of discovered he was on having rants when I saw him recently. I sort of friended him. Because I didn't know Richard that well. He was friends with my mates. And his mum was actually quite a notorious character. She was quite classic. A lot of people, more people I knew her than him. Funnily enough.
What, she just a sort of a music?
Oh yeah, she was just a character.
She'd turn up to the clubs.
Oh no, she was just a person around town. But Richard was the best club manager I ever worked for, because he'd come in. You know, I was either warm up or graveyard, because I was the youngest guy in our crew. You know, which is actually a really good way to cut your teeth as a DJ. Yeah, because you're dealing with people for the last couple of hours when they're off their bollocks, or you're getting that floor ready for the guest. Yeah. And your job is to leave a full floor, you know. But Richard was the kind of club manager. He'd come in, walk up to me at the booth and go, "What's going on?" I'd be like, "Well, what's the problem?" He'd say, "Turn it up, bro." You know? No, BM, just fucking redline it. You know, it was a great place. You know, they had all sorts of little bells and whistles there, which it was a club built by clubbers, built by ravers for clubbers. You know. To take the music policy there was fantastic.
I know. I mean, I was only in London 4.5 months, but I know I went there more than once. But I do remember, even though it's not really, it doesn't really turn me on musically, but he's very skilled. I saw Carl Cox back in the 3 or 4 turntable days, and it just seemed to so suit that concrete box.
Yeah,
you
right,
know,
totally.
with that sound system. And just him kind of really visible. They had him really visible. Just. You know,
the best one I ever did, the best session I ever had at the end was we were doing bar, and it was Aphex Twin in the main room, and we were just like, "All right, who's playing with Aphex Twins?" And we were like, "I'm not," and then the other bro's like, "I'm not." And it was like, "Okay, well, none of us are then." Pretty much, we knew the room was going to clear anyway, but he was just extraordinary. You know,
live or
just doing something completely bonkers. No one could really work out what he's done. I don't know if he just put a CD and stood there and mimed. He was just what came out of the PA was all I was interested in. It was terrifying.
So there was the jungle thing. Were you sort of in there with a lot of those crews earlier on, or just sort of just as an audience member and record buyer?
Well, I played on the Jungle Pirate, and I was a record buyer, so I'd be buying records off Nicky Black Market and Ray Keith and that. And then, of course, when we got the end, we were backroom residents. We did Black Market record nights. We were the resident in the back room. So, but you know what? There's a thing about drum and bass, and funnily enough, this got exported with the music. There's stush, right? It's an English word. It just means sort of unfriendly, I suppose. You know, so
staunch.
Staunch. It's a staunch thing. So it was always this kind of vibe. And honestly, I grew up in Haringey, Tottenham and Haringey. That's where jungle comes from, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but you know, it's one of those things. You know, you just don't. You're not really. So we, you know, I know all those guys, but it wasn't like a thing. You don't hang around and swaps, but it was just, it's like you
So
guys are
even
playing
though-
that way, you're playing that way.
Right.
Yeah.
So even
Quite
in that,
stush.
I find that interesting in the those early jungle years, because I thought they had more of a reggae kind of vibe. Because I thought it was when sitting here as two white guys. I thought it was when the white folk found it and turned it to drum and bass. It got that kind of heavy metal staunch about it. That's the staunch I don't really.
What is interesting is I watched it change, and
Yeah.
as far as those guys were concerned, right? So we were residents with Ronnie Size. Ronnie played here the other way. I've met Ronnie.
Yeah.
But like, I worked with 3 years residencies with him in London. He wouldn't recognise me on the road, and I'd never really talked to him. It's kind of weird. It was quite of a separate
it was
thing.
a nightclub, Toby. It's not like you're meeting in the staff room.
Mate, I tell you what, the VIP lounge at the end was pretty intimate. But it would literally be, that crew would be over there,
Yeah.
and our crew would be over there, because we were more white middle class and sort of more eccentric and hippie, and they were staunch as, we just do drum and bass. So there was that kind of vibe. But that's the interesting thing about London, but I don't think it was all very, very serious. What cracked me up here is I came over here and there was a drum and bass scene, and all these lovely young Kiwi lads were all being like, staunch. It's like, bro, be into the music. You don't have to act like a knob, Nicky Blackmarket is a knob. He's just got that personality,
Yeah, it's an odd. Yeah, it's an odd thing that.
But it's not the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
No offence, Nicky.
I'm sure he's listening.
Who did I see the other week? It was Hype, and again, I hadn't seen him. He was playing at Nick of the Woods.
Was he?
Yeah,
God, the world passes me by.
Fuck, it was funny. And I was going to pick some gear up from Nick of the Woods.
Yeah.
And I was coming down the stairs, and I was with my mate Cumby, and I said, "Oh, what was it? It's a scratch night or something." And I could hear this terrible scratching going over drum and bass. And as I walked to the bottom of the stairs, I didn't even know Hype was playing, right? Walked to the bottom of the stairs, I looked down the room and was like, "Oh, you're joking." And I was like, I know that bad scratch, because I used to be a resident with him listening to that bad scratch. And I was like, and he's a total, he's an unpleasant person. So it's like, walked in there and I was like, oh, classic, and he was just warming up, just doing a PA sound check.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to say hello.
Surely someone would tap you on the shoulder after all those years and say, maybe you shouldn't do that scratch.
Maybe I should be the guy to tell him. Oi, remember me? No.
So you pack it all in. You pack it all in at some stage. When did you just go? I'm gapping it. I'm going back to New Zealand.
Yeah, I had to go.
Late 90s, early 2000s.
So 98 or 99. I came over for a look and I came back basically. So then we settled here in 99. My then girlfriend of 3 months at the time said, "Take me with you." We'd been married. My darling wife Lynn. We've been married 17 years.
Wow.
So yeah, it was quite a bit of a punt.
Yeah, she's born and bred London.
She's Irish.
Right.
Yeah. So, but she's very much a Londoner. She sort of went and nursed in London from the age of 18. She's kind of a London Irish lady, and so we just bailed. That was the one. Get out of Dodge. And you know what?
So low key, just.
Yeah,
it's a lot of planning to low key disappear to the other side of the world.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a thing. I can't say I did it in the best circumstances.
Hang on. So how rushed are we talking here? Was the toaster and the kettle left in the kitchen?
It was pretty much.
Right, okay.
It was pretty much. I tapped up a mate for a loan, took the money, bought a ticket, buggered off. Sorry, Dave Cooper, I never did pay you the money. I offered, though. I actually did offer when I saw him at a party many moons later, and he said, "Oh no, give it to charity." So I was like, "Yeah, okay."
Nice.
Yeah, right. But anyway,
so you get here, but your family are over there. So you get here, and you've got really not a lot of connections.
No,
here.
but it was an amazing thing.
Auckland, Wellington, Dunedin.
A wonderful thing about New Zealand is it's an incredibly inviting place for people.
Auckland, where'd you land?
I landed in Auckland.
Yeah.
Walked straight into a bar. I think I met Cuba from
Cuba and Gizmo.
Cuba and Gizmo.
Yeah.
Suddenly, someone said, "Oh, you should meet this guy Jason Howson. He's into that garage music you're
Yeah.
into." And Jason was selling records out the back of a car. It was it was a tiny little thing, but everyone was immediately puts you in the right direction.
I do like that about music scenes is if you move or even if you holiday somewhere, all these connects come from the fact that you like the same thing as that person likes.
Yeah, totally, man.
You probably might have found it harder if you didn't have that particular sort of interest or hobby or
Absolutely.
whatever.
I've got a few theories. They're all half-assed, but I definitely think that
This is the Half-Assed Theory Show.
great.
Okay, I'll give you 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Half-assed theory number one: that music is a not necessarily a a linguistic form of communication. You can have a tune which has not got lyrics, right?
Yeah.
Dance music proved that for a long time. You can play music in a different language to somebody. They don't understand the words, but they like the style and the pattern of the vocal. So it basically can transcend cultural borders, right? It can communicate to somebody a feeling and an idea which may not be intended, but it certainly communicates, and it communicates quite passionately. So you're left with this, and I find that people who like the same music as me, like when you start getting technically looking at it, we're going to get on. We probably have similar political and social
senses
outlooks.
of humour.
Probably mates in common.
Yeah.
Probably enjoy some of the same experiences in varying degrees. But it's quite an interesting thing, and I've never find that divergent. Someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, that's one of my favourite tunes," and you go, "Huh? That's one of my favourite tunes." Bro for life. Or
when someone does that when you're out playing, it's like, how do you even know that record?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Fully,
so then automatically that's the interesting person for me for the rest of the night.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, and I'm just one happy customer is all I aim for. You know, great if you've got a room full of people having a great time. But if one person comes up to you at the end of any gig and says, "Actually, thanks," you know, that I felt something, or whatever it was. I mean, I think music should be able to make you cry. Music should be able to make you rave all night.
Maybe, I remember once in Nelson doing this pre-gathering Mad Professor show because he did a show before the gathering, and a girl came up to me after my set, or it might have even been the end of the night after him. So I'd played beforehand, so this is, a distance of time down the track with this slightly muddied $20 note, and said, "I found this in the venue earlier tonight, but I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your set, so buy yourself breakfast."
Oh, bless.
Result. That's great. Who finds $20 and gives it away?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It really is.
Yeah.
And I think that's what keeps me DJing. I go through periods where I focus more time on just building sound, hustling gigs, and trying to get the thing across the line, facilitating other things. But so it's still quite a regular. I'm kind of pretty much semi-retired or retired, man. I've got mixed feelings about that. So it's still a part of your regiment. You're still doing stuff weekly, and we still run a show on bass. We're always got a gig in the pipeline. We're always developing tunes. With contact with artists. I look at music as a series of things. It's not just the one thing anymore for me, because DJing used to be just the one thing. I was like, no, I don't get on the mic. I don't talk on the radio.
Do you get on the mic now?
Well,
do you toast, Toby?
No, no. I think I've invented the term Jafakin, right? Actually, I've coined it. I worked it out, and I really find, as probably West Indians do, they find people taking a piss out of their accent quite annoying. So, I don't toast on the mic because I don't think particularly I've got nothing to say.
I remember seeing a white Australian drum and bass MC in Melbourne saying, without a hint of self-checking himself or whatever, we had a wicked night in London last night. Because he'd obviously just learnt that he hadn't been in London last night. He was from the back of Melbourne.
Right.
So it was just a local gig for him in his local town. He may or may not have ever left, but he'd just picked that up off a thing.
Well, the thing is, anything it's that cargo cult thing. You take something out of context and it can become meaningless, and you can impart new meaning to it. So, people want to say scene and talk Rasta online and they're from Invercargill, that's fine. I don't really mind. I just for your own benefit, people, tap on the shoulder as another Park Yard male. A lot of my friends are West Indian. They'll either find it that you look silly sounding like that, or they might find it mildly irritating. It's somewhere in that spectrum. It's not a big thing. You ain't killed no baby seals here. But, one of Toby's mildly irritating features.
It's funny how as a culture it's often mined in pop culture in a lot of different weird ways. So if it's not even the music thing, it's like, I was with Spikey once in Auckland, and I'd never even thought about this until Spikey's West Indian friend, folks, who we were at a head shop, and he was really offended by the sort of, they were like faux Rastaman smoking devices, because to him it's kind of like a gollywog designed to smoke kind of pot.
I think there's a huge debate about cultural appropriation.
Some of it I think is nonsense. I don't mind if someone wears. I
think cultural. Jesus Christ, we're DJs. We culturally appropriate and disseminate that appropriation. To be honest, I didn't the records I've got from New York, I don't know. I've been to New York.
Yeah.
It ain't my culture.
No.
But it's very much part of my music, who I am.
Yeah.
So we appropriate, we regurgitate, we disseminate.
Yeah.
But there's always, you just got to be aware of certain people's, I think that when you start getting into people's religious areas, when you start advantaging yourself over people who are weaker and more marginal than you. So, you can make a profit out selling Rasta bongs, but there's plenty of Rastas who ain't got no money from being a Rasta, right? So that's my point. Yeah. There is an exploitative aspect, which I think we all have to decide for ourselves where that line is. I'd say so. It's a really interesting thing, and I find it's quite, there's huge debates on race. Last year I think we reached peak racism in New Zealand last year. In terms of our debate, and I'm hoping that was a good thing. I'm always living hope. Wouldn't get out of bed if I didn't. But we do have massive issues to consider here about how our casual racism needs to be addressed and challenged, I think. How we do it, that's up to us. We'll just take time.
What do you mean there?
Well, I just think...
I think it's everywhere, man.
I think it is everywhere.
I
think it is everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm lucky to come from a place, unlucky possibly, to come from a place where it's quite passionately anti-racist, London, because you just can't express certain things about other people on the basis of culture, because you're going to cause offence because you're surrounded by people of other culture. So it's not a prison. In fact, it's quite liberating. There's disparaging talk about Asian drivers, all of those things which are pretty acceptable in social company. I don't find acceptable. Yeah. And I'm guilty of not intercepting friends when they say something which is casually racist, you know. But, we'll deal with it. We're in a wonderful position to deal with it, let's be honest.
Actually, now you've made me think about that further, and this comes back to me to something like Carnival and just the way you're talking about London. It's weird. This has just been a topic that's come up with me with a few people lately because I've been pondering it. To me, it feels like Auckland has that. Auckland's suddenly a huge melting pot of so many different races and languages and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, but this city definitely hasn't sussed out how it all works yet.
I think
but related to Notting Hill,
my
my pie-in-the-sky idea was, because I think music and events and food and smells and sounds is what unifies people.
We need a carnival.
Yes, but not all.
Reading your mind,
but not.
Yes.
But more to the point, because that's a simple thing. Is not a one race or like how at its heart Notting Hill is a West Indian carnival, whatever, an African carnival. We just need an Auckland carnival. That's like
it's a celebration of our multicultural.
There's a Brazilian crew here. There's an Indian crew here. There's China. There's all these. I mean, what's the Chinese music scene? I'd love to know.
Yeah, I'd be amazing. I mean,
J Star had that had a Cantonese rapper on his album. I was like, well, I didn't even know that was a thing.
There's Bangla jams here. There's all sorts of cool stuff.
Don't get me started on a couple of cab drivers I've had who just funked me out. I've been like,
I know. What are you listening to?
What are you playing? This is the funkiest, heaviest, deepest.
Heavy beats.
And then this one guy in Melbourne years ago told me all about some super Indian DJ called Belly Sagoo, who, if I hadn't have been in this cab, I never would have.
Totally.
Anyway, I think something like that's a good step to, because you've got Diwali, you've got this, that, and the other. That's nice, but that's still. They're all separate. Yeah. So what about you have one big...
Oh, it'd be great. There is actually...
We both got very excited then.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, it's a little thing I've been trying to push over the line for years. We've talked about in various people and various parameters, looked at the viaduct.
Need someone like Chris Morley Hall, but he's Wellington-based now, but someone who's one of those...
A force of nature. No, we kind of need that kind of someone... ATEED, is that the business part of the Auckland... Enterprise Initiative of Auckland Council, ATEED, is that what they're called?
No idea.
They're the twats with the money who throw money at stuff to make Auckland cool, funky and successful. Dude, goes out there, let's have a nice old carnival at the viaduct. Let's see big sound systems on every corner.
Oh my God.
Let's have bands, let's have food.
This is Auckland. Auckland.
It'll be off the chain. Yeah. Well, trouble is, you go down the viaduct, you've got the contract's gone to one commercial company, they won't let anyone else bring PA in there. You couldn't, everything here's quite tight. We're all working it. We will get a carnival.
What about this? Well, I'm in on board, however I can help, but what about this? Notting Hill's a satellite suburb or whatever. I actually thought, because the Kingsland Carnival, they call it the carnival here, it's pretty lame.
Oh, really?
But I thought Kingsland, I just think the way the Kingsland's laid out, somewhere like here could be a great start for a,
K Road.
There's quite sort of open-minded business people here and stuff. But sort of chucking on a...
The trouble is, you saw the K Road Carnival. right?
I did not see the
It was
K-Road
really
Carnival.
nice. We actually had Johnny Osborne was
Yeah, the
playing
reggae
on the back of the
superstar.
truck. Yeah, that was fantastic, And, but it was... There was the Cross Street Carnival happened before that. We did a Reclaim the Streets and took over that road one year in protest against asset sales. And K Road, the amount of money, that the council spent on developing that event, the K Road Carnival, spend 100,000 on traffic control.
For that one day?
One day. Lay on some buses. And it was a great thing. It was a really nice way to see the street. But gone are the days things like Notting Hill Carnival can be born out of the people's choice. These things are far too regulated now.
Yep.
So you'd have to have brand sponsors. It'd be great to have a carnival, but it wouldn't be Notting Hill because it can't. The barriers in place.
We used to have these huge. Another topic I've touched on with people. We used to have big. These raves are part of folklore and underground music scenes. In Wellington, like 90s, a guy Leon was putting on these big parties called Eden, and he'd get a huge disused shed at the waterfront. I don't know of the numbers, but I'm sure it was over 2,000-3,000 people. This is like late 90s or whatever. There wasn't someone breathing down his neck about how many portaloos he needed per, how many security people he needed, what time, blah, blah, blah. I remember I saw the police roll up one night, and they were kind of like, this is so different to now. They sort of rolled down the window and asked someone outside smoking a cigarette, what's this then? Oh, it's a blah, 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 blah. Okay, window rolls up, drives off. Great.
Yeah.
This is where innovation comes from. This is where freedom comes from.
Well, ironically, when you're doing illegal parties or cheeky ones, the police aren't the problem.
Yeah.
It's actually council.
Council
charmers.
Bad example, but I'm saying that in
totally.
New Zealand in the 90s, all that resource consent or whatever it's called, wrong term, but there was less council red tape and so on.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been running sound for the J-Day event. One of our little political sidelines, of course, is legalising the weed, which is an important issue as far as I'm concerned as a lifelong medical marijuana user. But we've been doing that event in Albert Park for 15, 16 years with Jafa Mafia. 12 years or something.
Yeah.
Rolling out the sound system, organising the stalls, doing the whole thing. Now, that's a very high-value asset to Auckland Council. Man, the loopholes, the rigmaroles.
Why is it a high value asset to them?
There's only 3 events there a year:
Right.
J-Day, the Lantern Fest, and the BFM event. Right? Those are the only large events. So we're doing something which is entirely cheeky. Right? We don't have any permission. It's essentially a protest, but they're trying to make it harder and harder for us to do it. We only get a glimpse of that. Right? We have to fork out thousands on litter collection. Yeah. One shout on the mic, I could get the litter picked up. It's not; they don't trust people to do the people's job.
Yeah,
but we still, luckily, every year, we do what we want in that park, what DJs we want, what music we want, and we break the law publicly, and that's really important.
So, is it you? Are you one of the people directly liaising with person A from the council or whatever?
No, luckily I don't have to do that.
Okay, so there must be someone who's sound in the council who's dealing with whoever your mouthpiece
awesome.
is.
They're awesome. They try and get across the line, which was one of those anomalies. The thing is, we're only still there because the alternative for them is too threatening. If we we just told them we'd go march down Queen Street if they threw us out of the park, and that'd be way more of an issue. So we've basically barreled them. But
the whole bubble wrap society thing now, it's a confusing thing to me, man, on so many levels. Another outside of events, I saw something on the regular telly the other day about the school bus had something had gone. Yeah, leave that open, man. I don't think it'll be too noisy. Let them run around. The dogs. The school bus had changed its route or whatever, and so it was a 500-metre walk to school for all these kids. And I sort of thought, the whole stranger danger thing's kind of statistically a myth. Like 500 metres? I walked most of my childhood, all sorts of places. We got up to a little bit of mischief. We were kids. Yeah. Someone one day might throw a bottle in the air and run off or whatever. We didn't do that sort of stuff every day. But certainly none of us were abducted off the streets and taken to a dungeon. And I mean, I know it happens, but it's
I know.
So they go. The kids are getting fat and so on and stuff now. It's like, but it's because everyone's too freaked out to let the kids go and do anything. It's odd, man.
Humans are unique in the animal world in only one sense, that we radically try and alter our environment to suit ourselves. Yeah. Right? And that's the thing, constantly bubble wrapping kids. I mean, like shit, I used to, when we got dumped in London, and when I say dumped, because there was no warning, right? We turned up in London and Mum was like, oh, by the way, you're not going home. They didn't actually tell us.
Oh, really?
Right? It was a charming move. They thought logically that was the best way to handle the situation. But anyway, we were dumped in London, and it was like, oh, hang on a minute. So we broke out. So I used to have to cycle an hour each way to school, right? Me and my brother, right? And this is, you're having to get to school at 9 in the morning, and that's dark in London. So you're cycling through Hampstead Heath, cottaging areas in the dark, a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old on push bikes, all hot and steamy. No, it's never going to happen, but like it's extraordinary. We live in these almost, oh God, what are we saying like old fellas now?
No, I don't think we are. I think it was the saying is you can't walk skilled anymore. You can't throw a rave.
Shoebox in the middle of the road.
Let's segue from there to the state of the world in general, Toby. Are you fucking terrified by Trump and North Korea? And no, good. Tell me what your perspective is.
I've been one of my things. I've been involved in anti-fascist action since I was pretty young. That's a sort of another function of the family. My grandfather's a Polish Jew, so we built to hate Nazis, and Trump ain't a real Nazi.
I don't think
he's a sideshow with Nazi friends, basically. So there's nothing that worries me about that.
I don't think. Well, I don't know, man. I'm not down the evil. It's not the evil narrative that bothers me. It's the narcissistic, win at all costs. Mad tweeting based on low self-esteem.
Yes.
That cannot be a person who's responsible for the most terrifying button in the world.
Yeah, utterly hideous.
Okay.
I mean, for me, the bigger problem is capitalism, essentially, which delivered a beast like that and worships a beast like that, and the constant cultural messages the poor Americans are subject to celebrate wealth as a sign that you're morally superior. Now, the Victorians were the last people in Britain who were pushing the idea that poverty was basically a reflection of your character. Anyone who's ever...
And what happened to Britain? It was great, and now it's just Britain.
Yes.
So surely the states
these, unfortunately, ideas get forgotten, and people come around to this bullshit that worshipping a GDP and worshipping someone's success must qualify them as a good person, or a person to emulate, or a person to support, or whatever. Give them no time. They're just greedy, avaricious, or not necessarily.
I'm with you. Do you think, though, because it's such a huge shift in the way humans operate? Actually, I heard Obama on a podcast. Yes, Obama was on a podcast, which is cool in itself, saying that trying to change America, what a lot of people didn't understand is that the system, the history, everything that comes with something like trying to change the course of a nation that size. He said some people think it's like a speedboat, but he said it's actually like trying to steer a really, really large container ship,
tanker,
right?
Yeah.
So he only got it about 2 millimeters off its. It's a great.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I've been engaged politically all of my life because it wasn't a choice. My parents were political, so I was always subject to conversation and understanding there was rights and wrongs, and these things need to be contested. But yeah, the supertanker analogy is exactly, and that and that doesn't mean that if you accept it as this massive beast that can't be turned easily.
Well, no, that was what I was going to ask you, Toby. Sorry to cap that off. Was do you think that in our lifetime or in a subsequent lifetime that the emphasis on capitalism will change? Because I see India and China going that way.
Absolutely.
Okay. How do you think it's going to happen?
What I perceive as the supertanker, there's people. Some people are trying to turn the supertanker. I think the supertanker is going to sink. Personally, my political philosophy comes from a lifelong interest and affiliation with anarchist thought and ideas. And one of the principles of understanding anarchist thought and ideas is the idea of rise and fall of civilizations. You have a system which is utterly unsustainable. Period of history, it's a pattern which we can observe for an incredibly brief period as a species, which is 4 million years humans have been around. We have demonstrated our ability in 20,000 years to perpetuate a pattern of rise and fall with absolute regularity. And there's nothing sustainable about it. It's entirely a dead end. So I'm perfectly happy to accept fall, as an anarchist. I don't, like the same way as I might not be fearful of Trump, I'm not diminishing the real life consequences, the deaths that are happening daily in the States due to his racist, fascist policy. But the idea that someone like Trump is going to transform the face of the world and it's all going to be rebuilt in his images doesn't mean anything to me. The world will change as it changes.
I actually hope that just the absurdity of him getting in when he eventually gets out will mean that will serve as we can't let that happen again. Yeah. You know. And speaking of cycles, that last happened in the late 30s, early 40s. Not the fascist thing, I mean, but the same thing of okay. People, we can't let that happen again. Yeah,
well, it's return periods. There's a thing in history, and historians talk about a period of lifetime. Essentially, the average span of a human life, roughly 60 years, you balance out across populations. And that's a period enough. 60 years is enough time for us to forget what fascism means, and when we elect proto-fascists. So it corresponds with an entire lifespan. So the people who lived that life and knew how important it was, they're all dead. They're not here to remind us what we're walking back into. So these perpetual cycles, you have to accept them as someone who's interested in political life, but they're circles which roll in a direction. Definitely heading off a cliff.
Do you think true anarchy could work though, man? It's quite.
I think it's essentially always worked.
Right.
The idea that we can impose order on chaos is only an idea. We impose a certain amount of order on the chaos, but essentially the chaos is there. What I see
But what about when you really need the police? You know, it's like...
Absolutely. You know, but as an anarcho-syndicalist, you form a syndicate of friends, you form a community of 100 people plus, something around there, a sustainable unit which you can manage and maintain and support each other, heal each other, do whatever, and you police each other, and you protect each other, and you can form units like that. It's not really, I don't have a sort of post-apocalyptic vision of us running around with Mad Max cars and everything else, but I can't see...
I think I hear what you're saying. It's like even in the community you live in, so what I say is, you know, I'm obviously playing devil's advocate, but if you have that sort of thing, I'm even thinking what you're talking about is just having a sound neighbourhood of like, you know, neighbours are pretty good around here in general.
Pretty good.
A few people around
good
here.
Area.
I know what you mean. So it's almost like it polices itself. Like I'll text someone like I did the other night if I saw something untoward happening there, and I'm like, that's not Paul's friend. Why is he emptying all that stuff there and blah blah blah? So it's sort of like. It sounds like you're not a globalization fan.
I think they're all there's scales of political management. Yeah. I'm not an anti-globalist either, because I flip the coin. It can go one. There could be an Elon Musk world globalized technical fix to all our planetary worries, right? I think that's unlikely from my perspective. What I think is entirely likely and sustainable is the most traditional model of human existence, which is codependency. We aren't individuals. We are entirely a species based on our ability to be altruistic and to cooperate. This is what made us who we are. The memes that are current now, of course, is strident individualist capitalist gain is still being held, even in our tragically still in public media. GDP is still talked about. All these things are starting to be slowly discredited. Yeah. But these scales, you can have a globalised situation, or you can go back to the fundamental idea, which is a group of people self-organising, and these are all political scales, which are all relevant. Yeah. None of them counteract each other. Yeah. What we're seeing now in New Zealand especially is the emergence of strange and interesting little communities which are popping up, and they're self-sustaining and self-nurturing. I've come across a few in the last few years.
Analogous to hippie communes in the 70s and 80s.
Have you seen those beige people from Nelson?
No.
Well, it's an entire sub-tribe.
That's a terrible name, because I don't know if you're a Billy Connolly fan, but
oh, really?
Beige people are like...
Maybe I've used the wrong term.
Beige people are like, you know...
We'll call them the mud people. Okay. But that actually sounds racist, but because that goes back to something else.
I thought they...
No, honestly, I've seen them at a couple of festivals, and these little crews will turn up from Tarka and Nelson, and they're like all got dreads.
There's a strong tradition of that.
They're all blonded and sandied out, and they all wear everything they wear is brown.
Yeah, and
they just look awesome, and they're like a little sub-tribe of self-sustaining off-grid solar types from that area of New Zealand. I know people in the far north, iwi friends who are organising.
Coromandel's got a tradition of it as well.
Brilliant, and these are. If you go down the East Cape, you already got a place which is essentially entirely ignored by the central government. They don't functionally get much benefit whatsoever from infrastructural improvements in Auckland or tourism markets. Yeah. Occasionally someone in a Maori camper does the circuit and spends a few bucks. But otherwise, you see people are living in houses out there which you can't tell if someone's living in them. One shack has a light on, one shack doesn't. Yeah. That one's empty. You don't know. And these are self-sustaining communities relying on their own food production, their own self-sustaining, whatever the industries are they're developing. So
where are you? You're at Piha Way? Or?
I'm at Bethel's. I'm lucky to live in a small community.
And that's what I was going to ask. If you sound like the sort of man who you've tried to get to know everyone out and around there? Do you guys have a good... I mean, there'll be some Muppets living there. There always are. But you've got a good thing going with your neighbours?
It's an interesting thing. I've seen this process in action by just living in that valley. I've gradually got to know more of the people there, and you see the various people. But there's a lot of people on the same agenda there, trying to create relatively sensible lives for themselves and their children and their friends. So they've got food being grown there, you've got food being exchanged there, you've got services being exchanged there. I go and help out. I'm going to be painting a mate's house because his baby's turning up in a couple of weeks.
Who was originally a neighbour?
Yeah, well, he's now a New Valley member, so we'll be pitching in. We'll paint the geezer's house and charging him. He's going to help me for 2 days when I need to cut my gorse. And these things kind of work into very strong bonds and very strong trusts. Whenever there's a band playing from Bethel's Valley in town, the whole valley goes to support. It's like it's kind of cool.
How long have you been out there?
Downtown? 12 years.
Wow. So most of the time you've been back.
Good chunk, yeah.
Bought a house out there, or?
Yeah, we've got a place out there and sunk everything into it, and gradually, getting ourselves off grid, growing our own food. I mean, I try to be moving myself towards a position of sustainability that where somebody shuts the supermarket down next couple of days, I've got food, man. You've got to learn how to grow the food. I think that's a revolutionary act. These things, you need to learn how to heal your neighbours. You need to learn how to defend your communities, because honestly, have you ever called the cops? And what was the result when you did? Not a lot. And no offence to the police. Okay, I can say a few things about the police in West Auckland which aren't favourable, but the reality is we have to deal with it in an isolated community anyway, and it's a better resolution. We've dealt with everything from serious criminal crises to mental health crises. And
you've done it outside of the system?
We've done it outside the system.
Wow, really?
I had a mate up the valley, Joe. He's a digger driver. His older brother, who had a mental age of 10, had been brought up from Katikati. He went loose, had serious issues. I was driving around the road. We see him on the road. We stop. We pick him up. Me and another mate, we spent 8 hours getting this guy admitted to an hospital, and we deal with it in the community.
Wow.
We deal with it because there's nobody else. And I know Joe, he's got my back because I had his back that time.
I suddenly want to move from my very urban neighbours around during the day street. I mean, it has its advantages here.
It has its great advantages. I mean, you've got to love it here. I mean, how could I live out at Bethel's Beach if I couldn't come and listen to some good tunes in town?
Yeah.
And have, all the advantages
What's
of
the
city.
Commute?
30 minutes,
Okay.
So
and it doesn't clog up like a lot of the other... No big motorway to go on or whatever?
No big issues. You're pretty much straight down the motorway and out. So, and it's kind of, all those communities there, Bethel's, Piha and all the rest of them, they've all got their different little aspects. And
So you sort of expressed that, anarcho-syndicalist collectives have promised, but we are... And we've used the, what do you call it, the container ship analogy... politics and the political system isn't really going anywhere in New Zealand in a hurry. Are you happy with the change of government?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, you always have this thing when run up to elections where people say, but you're only choosing between the lesser of two evils. And I say, yes, and I'll choose the lesser of two evils. Funnily enough, I'll take lesser. Yeah. How's that? Right.
So you're not that radical that you don't vote?
Oh, hell, I've always voted despite the circumstances. It's actually the only time I refused to vote was when it was clear we were going to get rid of the Tories in England and Blair was going to come in, and I knew what kind of scumbag Blair was, and I didn't vote for him. Right. Despite the fact I could.
So that was one where the lesser of two evils were actually it's just two evils.
I was young. I was like, But, it's and again, it comes back to that scale of politics. I mean, people forget that what happens in your local community is more important, really, to you functionally than what happens in central government. We all get moist about elections, but local government elections, Auckland Council has more effects on our functional lives than anything happening in central government, and we don't ignore it.
I'll tell you what, though, coming back to bureaucracy, I went to vote in the local elections here, and it was just I'm not going to say complicated. It was an overly involved forensic document. I was just talking about compared to regular voting. I was like, well, for me to really give this thing, what it deserves, because I've not been provided any information, I actually need to go and research all these different people in all these categories I was voting for. Yeah. And I could immediately see how the actual, what do you say, like the deployment of the voting was just too convoluted.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
no one could make sense of what they were actually implying.
Even in the national elections, I'm in friggin' Kingsland in Auckland. I'm somewhere where you would think there'd been a number of Google searches on the different candidates. I couldn't find anything of weight about my Green Party candidate. I'm like, so that's the level of interest.
Yeah.
You know,
it's tokenism towards that.
You got it.
Process.
That's
it
yeah. And
all it really comes down to is you've got to get a feel for the personalities. And they say, "Oh, don't vote about personality."
You,
Absolutely vote about personality.
I'm so on the same page with that. I'm like,
if someone's an arsehole, don't vote for them.
Right, I was going to say, how do you measure this? But I'm like, that's right. It's like, is that a nice person?
Yeah.
Or is that
absolutely
someone who's freaky? Who I go.
And if you have the opportunity to actually physically know one of your potentially elected officials, then you can get a character. I ended up voting for Penny Bright in the Helensville electorate.
I don't know who that is.
She's awesome. She's the corruption buster in Auckland. Her and they've been after John Banks for years. She basically holds council to account for all their internal shenanigans. But she's a total fringe character. But she's an incredibly credible person who has integrity. And given an opportunity of Penny giving her my vote as one of her 600.
You just made me realise we've got a left Auckland full, super city council. We've got a left government. Now's the time to do our carnival.
Absolutely, yeah. But the trouble is in political cycles, when this team gets in town, they're going to try to appear not to be as much of that team as they are. They're going to be doing a fine balance. I mean, you've seen how quickly
Who?
the Labour Party,
Yeah.
they've backed away from several key policies already.
Yeah. But that's what politicians do, man.
I'm not disappointed.
But then at the same time, I've been very surprised by how quickly they have done stuff that, considering how New Zealand's been the last 10 years, are quite radical.
Yeah, quite
There'll be
radical.
some grumpy old white men out there based on some of the stuff that's happened in the last few weeks.
And I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
They're unsettling that population quite significantly. And we just got to support that. I mean, ironically, the terrible thing is, I think they had a sit-in the other day in Jacinda's parliamentary office, or whatever, from a migrant support group. You're not doing enough about migrants. Now, these guys that had John bloody Key and that other twat Bill English in power, they hadn't stormed their office and demanded. They're actually giving a harder time to left-wing politicians because they could potentially will do something. So now's the time not to be us all beating them with sticks. Really, we just got to be beating off the opposition.
Oh, goodness. How do you phrase? You might want to phrase that differently. I don't want to beat off anyone.
No.
In the opposition.
No, please, no. Hideous rogues gallery. But there they are, Bennett, and they're all just so smug, and they think all their job is now is to foul the chances of our progressive Labour government of doing anything meaningful. And
beating off and me and Paula Bennett is just
Paula the Mauler. Oh mate, there's some pretty good gossip out West Auckland about Paula, eh?
Oh, go on.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, she does sue, though, right? Off the record.
Wait,
no, we won't go there. We won't go there. We won't go there.
In the closing moments of the podcast, I want to talk about just a story that actually, it touched me, bro. You've got Sizzler here. I don't know where he is, but reggae fans, you'll understand the reasoning for that name. Dog fans, it's a Dashin, so it's obviously a sausage reference there. Your dog disappeared, and I was bummed out for you on Facebook. This is years ago, and then you're obviously just mortified, and then all these years pass, and you post up my dog's back.
Yeah, it was quite bizarre. It was
what happened in 4 years, man?
Well, you'd have to ask Sizzler. He's not saying much. But no, it was a crazy one. We had a birthday party for a reggae birthday party for some 21-year-olds, young Locksteady, one of New Zealand's best reggae DJs, and we had this good old 21st birthday on the front lawn. Dog chases a cat, dog heads down the drive, disappears. And I spent months looking for the bloody thing. Posters up all over Auckland. It was, you've got a pound puppy, you don't want to look after him, and poor sod got nicked. 4 years later, got a call, I'm at work, Lynn says, oh, the dog's turned up at the pound. And I was like, what? Which dog? Says Lynn. I was like, really? So, the same lady had decided she'd had enough, or she'd moved house. It was pretty clear.
What do you mean, same lady? Someone took it as their
Same
own?
woman. Well, here's the story.
Same as what?
Well, I worked it out because, we live at Bethel's Beach.
Yeah.
The dog was stolen from the end of our drive at Bethel's Beach.
Oh, it was stolen?
Well,
in the middle of the night, right, okay, yeah.
Well, no, we were he didn't have a collar on. He must have run down the drive, chased the chat. Someone nicked the dog, headed off. When she dumped the dog at the pound, she said, I went out to the beach the other day and this dog ran out of the bush. 4 years ago, lady. So it was clearly the same person because she couldn't have known that the dog was from Bethel's Beach. So
so you don't mean the original owner before you got it from the pound. You mean someone found it and
nicked it.
Isn't that odd? So the dog was in good. Sizzler was in good condition.
Oh, he was shite. You know, he was stank. He had flea allergy.
So
she
didn't even. So she kept this dog in this weird, not ideal situation for 4 years, and then dumped it again.
Yeah, and then dumped him. I know.
Story. Did he remember you?
Yeah, it was kind of weird.
Oh man, this is so.
It was kind of weird. It was kind of weird. There was a great emotional moment because everyone at the pound was like, "This never happens. We've actually recovered a lost dog."
And
4
they're all
years
animal
later.
people, so they're probably all stoked.
So there's
as well.
entourage there waiting to see the grand reunion, and he kind of was a bit confused. But then I got him, picked him up, took him, and sat him in the car, and he just stared at me and was just making this whistling noise, and it was really cute. And I was actually working on Power Rangers that day, and I said to the gaffer, I said, "Look, I'm at work, obviously. Lunch break's coming up. I'm going to go get my dog from the pound, who I haven't seen in 4 years. Your choices are you can find someone else to do my job this afternoon. I can bring the dog to work." And he's looking at me like, "Oh, shit, you're giving me an ultimatum." And he's like, so ended up, Sizzler came to work and worked on Power Rangers for the day. Trying to keep him quiet was a bit of an issue.
Well, I hope that it was okay for most of his time in that 4 years, because that's really odd. And you know,
it was really full on. I mean, I got put that post up, and then I got contacted by a Swedish dog rescue place. We're like, "Please, can we reshare your story because we want to give people hope?" And it was like, it became this minor little sensation in the dog recovery world. The story of Sizzler.
I'd like to leave it there. That's beautiful. It's been a pleasure, man.
Awesome.